The inauguration of Vladimir Putin was celebrated a year and a half ago with decidedly post-communist pomp and circumstance. He is only the second elected president of the new Russian Federation. Boris Yeltsin was the first. Putin's administration is committed to massive changes in the way Russia is governed, does business, and deals with the outside world. Putin is now one of the most powerful men in the world, but he is little known in America. He and President Bush seem to have connected with each other in ways that surprise most pundits, and may have surprised them as well. President Putin has been preparing for next week's summit meeting in his Kremlin office, where I met with him before our interview. It's my great privilege.
Nice to meet you.
It's in what Russians call Building Number 1 of the Kremlin, a former palace of the Tsars that is 2 centuries old, but was renovated during the Yeltsin administration. Putin has pledged support to President Bush in the war against terrorism. He is allowing Russian airspace to be used for American cargo flights to back up our military campaign, and has offered to help in search and rescue operations and the sharing of intelligence. Behind the forbidding walls of the Kremlin, I met with the remarkably open Vladimir Putin. Mr. President, you were in your office and saw on television the attack on the World Trade Center. What did you think? What did you feel when you saw it?
It was a usual working day, but I had very mixed feelings. First of all, it might seem a little bit strange, but I had the feeling of guilt for this tragedy. We had talked about the possible threats to the United States, to other countries, but we're not able to determine who, where, and how they can strike. And this was the first feeling I had, the feeling of anger, and to some extent the feeling of guilt. But at the same time, I understood quite well what the American people and the American leadership felt at that time.
I know that when you met with President Clinton, you warned them about the bin Laden problem, and you have said that you were ignored, and that surprised you. Did you feel guilty that you hadn't told us more so that we would have been better prepared?
I wouldn't want to go into any assessments of my colleagues, including the former President of the United States, because he was in a very difficult situation. But even at that time, we certainly were counting on a more active cooperation in combating international terrorism. I don't know whether it would have been possible to prevent these strikes on the United States by the terrorists, but it was a pity that our special services didn't get the information on time and warn the American people and the American political leadership about the tragedy that came to pass.
President Bush said that you were the first world leader to telephone him. He was very grateful for that. What did you say to him when you telephoned?
I expressed our solidarity with the American people. I said that Russia itself suffered terrorist blows and explosions in the city of Moscow as well. And perhaps I understood better than many people what the American people and American president felt, and that the American people understand that in this dire moment in time, they are not alone.
After the events of September 11th, you seem to have made a strategic and historic choice to become much closer to the West, to the United States. This could be a risk for you here at home, where not everybody wants you to be that close. Why did you do it?
I may tell you right now something that may sound quite unexpected to you. This is a choice that Russia made for itself quite a long time ago. Unfortunately, it was not noticed by everybody, but after September 11th, it was impossible not to notice it. And I believe that the tragic events of September 11th opened our eyes to this and underscored the fact that if we want to be protected, we should be together.
Is the Cold War over?
Probably it was over a long time ago. There can be no doubt about the fact that the Cold War is over.
Next week, you will meet again with President Bush. The first time you two met, President Bush said that he looked into your eyes and got, quote, a sense of your soul. Some people smiled when he said that. What do you think he saw in your soul?
Well, it's difficult for me to say what he saw in my soul. But those who smiled in response to his words on hearing him say that, well, there's one thing I can say about this. I believe it is not accidental that he, not they, became president of the United States. He sees better and deeper and understands the problems more accurately. And the fact that today the international coalition is successful is also thanks to President Bush. I'm convinced that he's a solid partner. We can argue about some problems, disagree about things, but I noticed that if he agrees with something, if he says yes, he actually pushes the question down to resolution. And we assess this quite positively, which is indicative of the fact that we can do business with this man. And he lives up to the agreements that he reaches.
If he says he will do something, he does it. Yes.
Yes, exactly.
I hear you do too.
I am trying.
One area of disagreement between the two presidents is the thorny issue of ballistic missiles. President Bush wants to set up an anti-missile defense system, a modern version of Ronald Reagan's Star Wars plan. But setting up the system would violate a 30-year-old treaty, the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, between the two countries. President Bush has said the treaty is outdated. Mr. Putin insists the ABM treaty is vital to international security. From reports, it looks as if there may be an agreement on the reduction of nuclear weapons when you and President Bush meet. But there is still the great disagreement over the ABM treaty. You want it to continue. President Bush wants to scrap it and build a missile defense system. How do you think these two conflicting points of view can be reconciled? What do you see as the compromise?
Well, it's somewhat difficult for me to talk about this with certainty, but I should say the compromise can only be found as a result of very intense negotiations. But as to the offensive and defensive arms, yes, I think that in that context we could reach quite quickly mutual agreements. Anyway, our position in this is quite flexible. We believe that the ABM Treaty of 1972 is important, essential, effective, and useful, but we have a negotiating platform starting from which we could reach agreements. At least I hope so.
Can you give us any hint?
Well, first of all, the ABM Treaty of 1972 already has a potential for developing defensive systems. There are other provisions in the treaty based on which we could find common approaches. And anyway, experts believe that based on those approaches, we could be able to formulate terms and conditions on the basis of the existing treaty without violating its substance.
So it could be accommodated in some way to allow the president to also have a missile defense system.
Well, the position of your president is also evolving. His view is not fixed.
Mr. President, you have been very supportive now of our war on terrorism, and you have said that you want nothing in return, but some advisors here in Russia say your country should get something, maybe a closer relationship with NATO, maybe even joining NATO, maybe helping with Russia's debt, maybe admission to the World Trade Organization. Will you hope to get any of this in return for your support?
I don't know who said that. Probably Churchill put it very beautifully. He said, the politicians are thinking about the next election, but statesmen are thinking about succeeding generations. Oddly, these are very fitting words to the situation. We have a common enemy, international terrorism, and the work that we are pursuing together is in our best interest. But it is also in our best interest to integrate Russia in the contemporary international community in every sense of the word, in defense, political, security. And in that sense, if we talk about rapprochement between Russia and the United States and the West, not only of Russia, but the international community has an interest in that. This doesn't have anything to do with the payment. Russia's not bargaining. It's not trying to make a deal. It is just that we cooperate.
We then turn to Afghanistan, where the Russians have had a great deal of experience. They fought there with 300,000 men for almost 10 years and were finally forced to withdraw. By 1996, the Taliban had fought its way to power. Putin warns against expecting instant results in Afghanistan, and he also had another warning.
I would say that the United States is losing not in the military, but in the information. It seems to me that on the information field, terrorists are acting more aggressively and more offensively, and they are presenting opposition in terms of emotions. As to the military dimension, in our assessment, things happen the way they should. And here, I agree with the leadership of the United States that it will take yet a lot of time, efforts, perhaps sacrifices, in order to bring the Afghani house in order.
When you say information, you are speaking of what we call public relations, getting the message out.
Yes, yes, this is true. You're right. When we see civilian casualties, this is often exaggerated. But the objective of the enemy is to sway the unity of the international coalition.
And we are right now losing that part of it, losing that campaign.
Well, at least we're not winning it.
Are there any conditions under which Russia would send ground troops to Afghanistan?
To us, this solution would be unacceptable. And I'll tell you why. To us, sending troops to Afghanistan is like, for you, U.S., returning your troops to Vietnam. But I should tell you something else. Even now, the Russian army is helping the United States, and not virtually, but actually, through intelligence, because we know the realities of Afghanistan. And we should also help the United States in rescue operations, including on the territory of Afghanistan. There's one more thing that I should mention. I showed to President Bush some intelligence data which indicate the plan of the international terrorists from Chechnya to Afghanistan with the direct objective of killing the Americans. And the American people should know about that. This is not some contrived propagandistic, talk. These are the realities of today.
Iran. Russia shares nuclear technology with Iran, ostensibly for civilian use. But the CIA says that Iran could use this to build nuclear weapons.
Well, it is a legend which has nothing to do with reality. We have some projects in atomic energy. The U.S. has the same projects in its relations with North Korea. It has nothing to do with developing nuclear weapons. We are categorically opposed to transferring any technologies to Iran that would help it develop nuclear weapons.
Mr. President, there are reports that nuclear materials have been stolen or even bought on the black market by terrorists. Several Russian defectors have testified before the U.S. Congress that there are Soviet-era portable nuclear bombs, so-called nuclear suitcases, missing from Russia. Is that the case?
I don't really believe this is true. These are just legends. One can probably assume that somebody tried to sell some nuclear secrets, but there is no documentary confirmation of those developments. I can tell you more. In the context of the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, I believe that this is one of the foremost threats of contemporary times.
Which is one of the major things you will be discussing when you come to America.
I believe that this is our most important topic of our discussion. So we'll discuss